Either way, we're ready to start. You ready?
I'm ready. Yeah.
All right, number 2, by popular demand, as you know. I mean, the first one did very well. I'm scared to tell you the Spotify number because the Spotify number did... I'm surprised not getting stopped, Mr. Grutta, on the streets. I'm asking for autographs. But number 2, popular demand. We went through most of the Egypt stuff, New York stuff. We went through your background the first time, so anyone who hasn't seen that should definitely go check it out because it was a really good podcast. Today we're going to do some more. I picked 4. I don't know if there's any more that you want to talk about. I texted you last night. I don't know where you want to start, but we already started with the JFK stuff before we actually hit the record button. So wherever you want to start, we can. Do you want to start your opinion, or do you want me to continue with mine?
No, let's talk about the JFK stuff.
Okay. So 62. Where are we at? Like, I don't know where exactly you want to start, but I think the real question is who did it. That's what we've been... We talk about the magic bullet. We talk about all the conspiracy theories. As I was just saying, we don't really know the entire motive as to why. A lot of people believe that it has to do with basically the Cuban Missile Crisis, everything kind of coming together in that regard, and how JFK tried to stop it, tried to do whatever with it, and then some people said it was mafia, some people said it was government. Now, for me, as I was just saying, I lean more so towards government rather than anyone else, but I do want your thoughts on, like, what you think happened.
Okay.
Not really an answer, but, like, what you think happened.
Yeah, of course, none of us can give the answer, the final answer. Hopefully someday we'll find that out. But, so I was in the 7th grade on the day of the assassination.
Wow. Okay.
And it was quite traumatic because, I hadn't lived through an assassination of a president.
Yeah.
There were a few before that time, obviously, but I wasn't around back then, And getting back to some comments I made during the last podcast, always been a very patriotic person. And saw all this unfold on television, Came home from school, saw what was on the news, saw the... physical assassination the next day or 2 days later of Oswald, and accepted everything that the government told us. Okay? But now, after 55 more years of reading stuff and looking into stuff, I don't believe anything that I saw that day. I don't believe anything. I have formed my own opinion over time. And I think it comes down to the Federal Reserve.
So you think government did it as well?
I think government paid the mafia to take them out.
Really?
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. I think government paid the mafia to take them out, as government has done apparently in other times. The mafia has been involved with the CIA.
Long time.
A long time, in many different instances, but... That's my conclusion at this point.
Well, Mom and I were just talking on the last podcast. There's a huge document about how the CIA has been working with the cartel for drug dealings and stuff.
Yes.
Again, so to your point, it doesn't surprise me at all. I think.
Again, I think the United States government has become the most corrupt government on the planet. Planet.
So let's see. We're 3 minutes in, and you already just made that comment. No.
Look at what's going on.
Yeah.
Okay. Look at the podcast with Putin.
Yeah.
That was aired this week, right? I mean, we've been jerking that guy around and that country around for 50 years.
Yeah.
50 years.
My only Mom and I watched that whole thing yesterday. My only thing with Putin is, I don't know how, just like China, I don't know how much you can actually trust what comes out of his mouth, obviously. But I do think from the sense of history and how much he was talking about and how all the actual data, like you can look at these documents that he talks about and yeah, he's right. I mean, I did the research last night. He didn't really tell anything that wasn't truthful or at some level of truth, but I just don't know how much of it, I don't want to say exaggeration is the right word, but I think there are little areas where you can manipulate what you're saying to kind of cater to a certain side. So
no doubt he's going to want to slant it to make him look
Yeah.
better than the situation. But the fact of the matter is, it appears that over the years we could have had a lot more peace or a lot more joint efforts in coming up with answers to some of the problems of the globe than we have. But as he says, the CIA runs your government.
Yeah.
Not
and everyone
your
gets a cut
not
too.
Your presidents. So
Because I don't know if you watched the whole interview, but he talks about how poor Boris Johnson was involved. And then you look up how much he made off that deal that was in the process of being done, and then they backed out in the end, but that's a different story. But then you're like, oh, what was his motives? World peace? Or was it the amount of money that was going to go into his organizations, his pocket, the whole, everyone over there? And we're seeing that a lot in our government right now, too, when you look at how much money we've given to Ukraine. And the one thing you have to agree with Putin on is, what's the point? Why are we doing this?
Right.
We could talk about morals, and of course,
Right.
war's horrible.
Right.
But the question is, where's our country's interests? Is it Ukraine or is it us? We have too many we have, again, to Putin's point, our border crisis. We have, just look at the corruption in our politics. We have, they just announced that they're trying to get Robert Kennedy Jr. off the ballot. It's like, why? Trump, at least you have, I guess, somewhat of an argument, but
Yeah.
So again, from that perspective, I do agree, but I do wonder how much Putin does kind of exaggerate. So back to what we were talking about. Yes, I can't trust the government with anything. The one theory I've heard about the mafia being involved is they talk about the casinos that were run, and I guess there was a crackdown on those casinos. I don't know if that was enough of a reason to actually say that the mafia did it, because the casinos, of course, I'm sure they're a big profit for the mafia, but it would make sense to me that the government would pay them to do it rather than do it on their own reasons, I guess.
Well, Kennedy's father had gone to the mafia to ask for their help in getting him elected. Okay? And in return, they get him elected, and the first thing Robert Kennedy does is go after the mafia.
Yeah.
So there's a little bit of resentment there. But I don't think that was the reason for the assassination. You know, he was making a lot of enemies in a lot of different areas, but what was the one thing that was the strongest impact on the United States? And that's the Federal Reserve. If he would have gotten rid of the Federal Reserve and put us back on the gold standard, all holy hell would have broke loose. You couldn't do today what they're doing, where they're just printing money 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to keep up this $34 trillion debt we have right now.
Right.
They wouldn't be able to do that. Not if we were back on the gold standard and the Federal Reserve was gone. So there's just too many people making too much money to allow that to happen.
Yeah. Well, it scares me when you see my generation get the question of like, oh, how do you stop inflation? And their answer is you just print more money. That's the complete opposite of what you want. Yeah. And it's a scary amount of people in this country that'll say that, right?
Well, they tried that in Argentina. That didn't really work out too well.
Yeah,
right?
and Venezuela. Venezuela did the same thing.
Right.
So people talk about these socialist countries and how great socialism is, and when you see it in practice, I don't think there's ever been a country that's been successful. People bring up, I believe, it's one of the, I always forget if it's Switzerland or Sweden, whichever one tried socialism. And they say, oh, it works for the last 4 years or whatever when they changed over. But they don't talk about how that's because they're coming from a democracy, basically, and capitalism, and how basically over 4 years they've been dying and they're not making any money on the socialistic practices. So, yeah, it never works.
The ironic thing about Kennedy is that going back to the Titanic, which I think was 1912, I think.
Yep.
3 of the 4 most outspoken men against getting off the gold standard or the Federal Reserve were on that ship when it went down.
On that ship? Or the guys that actually... Because there's a whole conspiracy behind the people that actually put money into that boat. I don't know if you ever heard that conspiracy.
J.P. Morgan. But J.P. Morgan was one of the 4 guys, supposedly, that was, against...
Really? I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's something you could do a little deep dive on when you get some free time.
That'll be podcast number 3, you and I with the Titanic. I've heard a lot of conspiracies on that one. I was telling Mom, well, it was a little off topic, but we were doing the Chuck E. Cheese conspiracy. Have you ever heard that one?
No.
You'll like this one. So people would go into Chuck E. Cheese and they were noticing that their pies were a little misshapen. So they thought that people were, like, if you left and there was 2 slices left, they would recycle it into the next pizza. How gross is that? And then that lasted for like a year, and then they were doing deep dives on Chuck E. Cheese. But it kind of goes to show there's a conspiracy in everything. It's just how much data there is to prove it.
Right.
And I don't know, out of all the conspiracies out there, I think JFK might have the most, right? Because let's talk about the magic bullet, right? The big one that everyone talks about, which is Lee Harvey Oswald took this crazy shot that went through JFK's throat, like back of his throat, out the front, hit the general in front of him, and broke that general's hand, which is a crazy shot. So I'll give you some. I don't know how much of the facts you know, so tell me if you already know this stuff. But he managed to shoot 3 very accurate shots in 5 seconds, which for that gun is possible, but you have to be a crazy marksman to do it. Now, he was a very good marksman, to my understanding. He was military trained. He was very close to being almost a perfect shooter. And then the year after, 2 years before the actual shooting, first year he shot very close to perfect. The next year it went down significantly. I don't know how significant. Like, I don't know what the level of significance is when it comes to marksman shooting. I don't have that level of expertise, but still, it's a pretty incredible shot to do.
Yeah, for a rifle. I mean, that was per today's standards, that was an antiquated rifle.
Yeah. Bolt action.
The whole problem I have with the single shooter and the bullet entry, the whole problem I have with all of that is, according to everything that I read, the back of Kennedy's head was blown away.
Yeah.
Well, that wouldn't have happened if the bullet entered from the back of the head. It would have to come in through the front of the head to blow the back of the head.
Right. My only, I guess, I don't want to say, I guess it is an argument, but I don't know, when you have something coming at you at that velocity and that much pressure is going through your body, because we're talking pretty big bullets, to my understanding, in a rifle like that. I don't know where the pressure goes. It has to go out somewhere. So if I can't fully prove something as being false, I think, like, if there's like another variable, I might have to dismiss it a little bit. The one that I hear the most, to kind of go with your theory, is when you actually listen to the recording, it sounds like there are 2 shots on top of each other, which means a 4th bullet. And then you definitely can't do what Lee Harvey Oswald did in that time. It's not possible to shoot 4 shots in that 5.5 seconds.
Right.
So then I would agree with you. Also, the fact that the trajectory of a bullet going through the president's head or throat, whatever you said, hitting the general in front of him and breaking his hand, so going through 2 people in the hand, back then they didn't really have bullets that could do that much damage, especially with a rifle like that. So that, to me, I don't want to say disproves the theory of 2 shots to the body, but there is the idea of his head whips forward, so one from the back, and then the whip backwards, which is going through the head. So you think it's a second shooter at least?
At least, yeah. From the front.
From the front.
Firing from the front of the car.
Yeah. I don't know if they've ever actually, I'm sure that by now they've had scientists that go through all those ballistics, but to coincide with what you're talking about, they talk about the photo editing. I don't know if you've ever seen this theory, but back then when you had photography, right, you did the old red lights and all that.
Yep.
It was actually very easy to take 2 photos, overlay them on each other, and then stick them. So they say that a lot of scientists who study that stuff have said that there's clearly a layer on top hiding a second shot. So I guess that does kind of shatter my theory. But
there's endless numbers of theories out there.
Yeah.
But I've seen a video of the car taken from the sidewalk area, passing by the depository building. And the head of the CIA was standing on the sidewalk at the time the car passed. Mm-hmm. That was George Bush at that time.
Really?
He was the head of the CIA the day that Kennedy got killed.
Wow. Yeah, that's a scary one. The other one that I found very interesting is, did you know that we've never actually seen Lee Harvey Oswald with the gun? Like, we've had pictures of the actual building where it could have been taken from, but we've never seen pictures of him on that day with the gun. We just see him arrested.
Yeah.
So,
well, from there we went to the movie theater, right?
We think.
That's where he shot the cop. The cop that looked just like Kennedy.
Right.
And then there's the theory out there that Kennedy's not buried at Arlington National Cemetery.
That one I haven't looked into at all.
The cop is buried. They put the cop on the plane because he looked just like Kennedy. and his wound would be as the shooter is described from the Warren report.
So you can't just dig up that body and try and figure it out? I'm sure there's rules to that.
I guess they could, but I gotta, somebody's gonna start that action.
Yeah, some of the theories, like the fact that the other one that leans me towards the government doing it is there are multiple eyewitnesses and just witnesses throughout that whole thing. There's a lot of people at this. What would you consider it, a rally or whatever you want to call it? Everyone says same story. They've been approached by 2 or 3 men saying, "Hey, we don't want you talking about this." There's a lot of accounts of that. Now, I don't know how many times. Like, let's say 150 people are asked to not talk about it, and 6 of those stories are true or made up. I don't know how many in a row, how many witnesses in a row you'd have to have the same story, because I don't know if 6 is enough.
Well, you got a presidential candidate that's been on television that says the CIA killed my uncle.
Oh yeah, which is probably why they want him off the ballot.
There you go. So.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, he's talked about how he's seen the autopsy and he's learned a lot more through his. And he says, I think the government did it. Like, there's a lot of anyone I would believe him just because it's his family. I don't know why.
Today, a rock star dies from a drug overdose or something. I mean, they have an autopsy and they have a toxicology report, and it's weeks before they bury the body.
Yeah.
What was the rush to get Kennedy in the ground in 3 days?
Yeah, that's true too. Yeah.
How come he had to go in right away? Let's examine and see what you find.
Well, they even talk about the doctors that they had like 12 doctors trying to, I don't know if revive is the right word, but try and figure out what happened. And a couple of them were Nobel Peace Prize winners, or at least up for the Nobel Prize. And they said, multiple bullets, multiple wounds. So, to your point, that's one of those things we'll never know, but it's always an interesting. Well, remember they said, I think it was Trump that was supposed to make it public, right?
They were supposed to unseal it 60 years.
Yeah, it's been past 60 years, and they were like, we'll unseal some of it.
There's probably still too many people around that it could affect.
Yeah.
Maybe they got to make it 100 years. By then, everybody's dead.
Yeah. But, I wish again, you wish you had more witnesses or more accounts of what could have happened, but to your point, a lot of them have probably passed away at this point. So, I do believe it was multiple shooters at this point. I do think it's... I just wish I knew a little bit more the motive behind of why. I don't know if the Federal Reserve was the only answer. I'm sure there's some other things. Maybe FBI did hire the CIA did hire the mafia, but I just feel like the mafia wouldn't have much of interest in doing that. I mean, to kill a president, unless it's a crazy amount of money for that time, which I'm sure it was, but there's a lot of moving parts there.
Well, again, they felt like they had been screwed over by Joe Kennedy, the father. Mm-hmm. They helped get him elected, and the next thing you know, his brother is coming after them all.
Isn't it funny, though, how nowadays, and this is a little off topic, but a lot of these mafia guys, like some of the worst, now have podcasts, and they just talk about stuff they did. Right? Remember, they used to be out of the limelight, and now they're... Right, I see, what's his name? Sammy the Bull. He's on like 20 different podcasts now, just giving his stories.
They're rock stars.
Yeah, it's very weird how time changes.
Yeah.
So, that stuff's always interesting to me. But speaking of Sammy the Bull in New York, I would like to get into 9/11 with you. Now, this is one I've done extensive research on, and I think you and I are kind of in agreement on this one. I won't say that because I want to hear your opinion on it. Especially because you're probably the best person when it comes to these buildings and stuff. For those of you that don't know why, watch the first podcast. But I want to know what your thoughts are on 9/11. I'll tell you, I do think that it is somewhat of an inside job. I think there were people in this country that knew it was happening and didn't say anything. But I don't know if I would say that the whole government planned it. But I want your thoughts.
Well, the timing of the whole thing is what makes this all very suspicious to me. At this point, I mean, Silverstein had just purchased the property 30 days before.
I'm glad you mentioned this right off the bat because there's a lot to the Silverstein stuff that I think would open a lot of people's eyes. But please continue. I'd like to talk about that.
All right. So he's in the middle of this whole thing. He purchased the property. Okay. I read that one of the first things he wanted to do was to renovate the buildings. So when those buildings were put up back in the late 60s, early 70s, the Port Authority code was less than the New York City code. Today, it's more than the New York City code. The new tower that I worked on is built to a higher standard than New York City code.
Oh, really?
But back at that time when the two towers were put up, that was built to a less code. So the buildings were loaded with asbestos. The buildings weren't really safe. And they looked into the cost of renovating these buildings to bring them up to today's standards. And it was going to be in the billions of dollars. And somebody asked, well, why don't we just knock them down? You know, and just build some new buildings. And it's not as easy just knocking them down, because in today's world, you're going to knock down any building, anywhere in this country. It has to be abated first.
Right.
So you would have had to spend those billions of dollars to abate the two towers and then knock them down and build what you were going to build. So the cost was just exorbitant. Okay? And it leads to the question, you know, how do we get the buildings down without spending the money?
Yeah. So the one thing that I think a lot of people say, and it's kind of become a meme almost, is that jet fuel can't melt steel beams. I'm sure you've heard this theory. Do you believe that? Because I've seen a couple scientific things on that.
I'm not an engineer. Okay? I would think logically that with the building being hit at the location where they were hit, the amount of weight of what was falling down to the area that was compromised, I would think that that collapse could trigger the whole building to come down.
Come down inward, yeah.
Okay. You don't have to melt the steel.
You just have to bend it.
All you got to do is bend it. All you got to do is, once there's a yield point on the steel. So once the steel reaches that yield point, it can no longer support what it was designed to support. Again, I'm not an engineer, so I can't say if, you know, the whole floor was being compromised due to the heat from the fire in there. Right. I don't know.
The one thing that Silverstein did that I wanted to ask you this when I saw this, because I want to know if this was normal, but he took out a 99-year insurance policy and a 99-year lease. Is that normal to take a 99-year lease out on a building?
Yeah, the 99-year lease is normal.
Oh, okay.
That's done a lot. I don't know about the insurance.
Well, it was a specific terrorist insurance.
Yeah.
But to my understanding, there was a bomb threat, or a bomb went off a couple years prior in that building.
Yeah, the parking garage.
Yeah. So it might have made sense, but still, it was the timing's very weird in that regard. Now, here's another one for you. I don't know if you know this one. Did you know that 2 days before, there was an absurd amount of put options on the two airlines that went into the towers? Like a very weird number of...
I did not know that.
Yeah.
I have read that all the gold was removed from the towers.
I've heard that one too, yes.
A few days before they came down. And the day of the incident, none of the Silverstein family members were in either of the towers, even though they had offices there.
Yeah, and were there pretty regularly.
And in Tower 7. Tower 7, I think, is where they had most of those, but they weren't in Tower 7 either, which came down, I guess, the next day because of fires in the basement, they said.
Oh, really? Yeah, I mean, I guess that would make sense, but I don't know if it goes to show that Silverstein was in on it, but it kind of grosses me out how, like, a week later, he goes to court and he's like, technically, I should get paid twice because it's two buildings.
Right.
Like, he only cared about the money when something horrific like that happens.
Right.
So it does go to show, maybe it's just how psychotic that guy was, but it's stuff like that that make me go, there's a lot more to this than...
well, the most disturbing thing I've read over the past couple of years is the presence of the thermite, which is the explosive material that they have found in the rubble. Mm-hmm. So who's going to explain that?
Right.
Where did the thermite come from? Who put the thermite in the building? Why was it in there?
Yeah.
And they found it in the dust and the debris. They found it on steel that was left. Very little steel was left. It just the explosion as the building came down was so intense that it basically pulverized steel and concrete.
Yeah,
That's not normal.
Right.
That's not normal.
That's why
I
they
don't
say
care
that,
if the building is 200 stories high. There should be big pieces of steel laying all over the ground when it comes down, and all they have is dust.
That's why when they talk about the jet fuel stuff, people say, "Oh, well, it's just melting; it's not burning." But we do have evidence of steel just disappearing into nothing. Yeah. So there is something that caused at least a certain point of it to burn.
Well, that steel that was, if they say melting, that steel was up on the 87th floor.
Yeah.
What happened to the steel on the 20th floor, and the 30th floor, and the 40th floor?
Right.
That was nowhere near the heat source.
So the only theory I've heard on that is if you hit something very, very hard with enough weight, it will actually melt it. Have you ever heard the? There's a theory on. There's an actual measurement of how hard you have to slap a chicken to cook it. As I said, there's a conspiracy for everything. I forget how many miles an hour you have to hit it. But apparently if you hit a chicken hard enough, it'll just automatically cook.
But again, the impact was on the 87th floor.
Right. So I guess they're talking about the impact from whatever landed from the top to the bottom. What's that? And honestly, I doubt it's that.
I don't think there was much of an impact in that sense that it was going into a hollow structure.
Excuse me. And then they talk
how did that impact get transferred down to the 30th floor, 20th floor? I don't see it happening.
But then they talk about the other plane that went to the Pentagon. And a lot of people forget about that one conveniently. But if you look at that one, it's very weird how it landed in our archives, right? They were trying to get rid of our archive center, but no one really knows why. And then all of a sudden, all this money, like a lot of our debts and stuff, I forget where they were to, but they just disappeared and everyone goes, okay. Right? That's another weird one.
Yep.
It was billions of dollars of just, I guess we just can't find it, so we're good. We'll just forget about it.
Right.
Can't just do that with billions of dollars. So, in conclusion for me, and again, I don't know if you've really given your conclusion yet, but I don't think that the government was, I'm sure there were people involved. I think there were people that knew it was coming, but I think from a mass scale of things, I don't think that the government actually did it. Right? I think they profited off of it and could have stopped it, but I don't think that it was their decision. They talk about Israeli media that did it as well. There were some Israeli soldiers there in a black van.
Yes.
Yeah.
I've read things that there was Israelis in the building wiring the explosives in various electric closets throughout the building.
Specifically the Mossad, not just, I shouldn't say, I don't know how that works. I don't want to lump them together.
I don't know. I mean, it was a reason to profit off the demolition of the two buildings. But there could have been other reasons why the building was taken down.
What do you think?
Somebody's hiding something. What are they hiding? Why'd they take the gold out of there? Why did all the gold get taken out?
Yeah, there must have been something in there. If it is to your point, maybe it was on a personal level, or I don't know what exactly they hid there. Like in the sense of what kind of documents could have been there. I've never read into it, but yeah, to your point. I mean, I don't know where I'm really going with this, but it's kind of, well, this is the beauty of conspiracies. No one ever really knows what the point is. But usually I can lean towards one thing or another based off the evidence. So if I knew what was in those documents, I'd give you a little bit more of like a concise answer of who did it. But I do think Silverstein was in on it.
You see, if they were trying to inflict maximum damage on New York City, that wasn't the place to crash the planes. They should have crashed the planes into Times Square. Times Square is where every single subway line converges. So if you recall, the entire area down by the Twin Towers was compromised for 10, 12 years before it came back to normal. Could you imagine Times Square being knocked out for 10 or 12 years?
Yeah, that's a good point.
would have taken down far more buildings, would have impacted all the subway lines throughout the city. It would have brought the city to its knees. But they chose the towers for some reason.
Do you think it could have been just to send a message rather than do damage?
I don't know. I mean, if I was a terrorist, I'd want to send the message that hurts the most. Well, why wouldn't you attack Times Square? That's the center of the city. It's where everything converges. And it would have just completely stopped all the transportation in the city overnight.
Yeah.
For many, many years. And it would have been far harder to restore the subway system in Times Square than it was to restore it at the World Trade Center, because it's kind of isolated over there. When you get over by Battery Park City and World Trade,
they did make traveling a lot.
We're almost out of New York City at that point.
They did make air travel a lot more annoying, though.
Oh yeah,
TSA, everyone hates, but
we're taking our shoes off. Just let everybody walk down the aisle naked. That's the best way to do it.
No, I mean, half kidding, but I just remember we went to Mexico a couple months after that. I forget when our Mexico trip was. Probably a year later after that, I would say, because if that was September, so probably that February was usually when we would go. I just remember we're on this TSA line, and my uncle goes, "What the hell are we doing?" Stuff like that, and everyone agreed. Everyone's like, "Yeah, why are we doing this?" So, yeah, it changed travel forever.
Changed travel forever.
Yeah. And then it hasn't gotten much better either. My grandmother, we have a little bit of a joke, but my grandmother keeps bringing up the Greyhound buses to get from New Bern all the way up to New York, thinking that that's like a 6-hour drive.
Right.
That's like, I mean, you might be there by the next day, maybe.
Right.
So, yeah, all travel's been kind of destroyed. Not just because of that, because of other things, of course. But, again, I don't know how you recover from something like that, truly. You can't go back to normal after something like that.
No.
So... I think a lot of people were in on that one. When you look at the put-ins for the plane airlines, it's a crazy astronomical number. So a lot of people didn't know at the higher levels and just didn't tell anyone. So I wonder who knew in the beginning. I don't know. To your point, I don't know if that was government that knew. I'm sure someone in the CIA or FBI knew.
Right.
But
I just don't see the government endorsing a plan that a private citizen puts together. There's got to be something bigger. It's got to be beyond just Silverstein.
Oh yeah.
Gotta be bigger.
He's just kind of at the front lines because he's the one that owned the buildings and whatever. But everyone so for those of you that don't really know how it works, you have a board that usually makes that decision. So even though he owns the buildings themselves, there's a board of people that decide on insurance policies. I don't even know what else is in there, but mainly insurance, how many occupants that they're going to take, whatever. And when he said to do this, everyone was like, "Hey, this is crazy. Why would you do that?" And he put a crazy amount of money down. And then within a month, the planes hit.
Right.
That's an interesting. That's where you go, man. That's a weird coincidence. So, yeah. What else? I got. Ray, you want to talk about another one that I'm interested in?
Sure.
Your opinion? A little more modern day, what do you think of the Epstein Island stuff? Oh, once the hand goes on the table, that's how I know.
Why is it taking this long for the list to be revealed?
Why is it taking that long? And why is it that we know that there's people that have been victims of this and Ghislaine Maxwell is still not really convicted of anything? Yeah. That's another one that's very weird to me.
Yeah. And is Epstein really dead?
Is Epstein really dead? And also, what was the point of it? A lot of people think that was a CIA up as well. They think that he was doing like these honeypots to get powerful people in tough positions. And to your point, I kind of lean by it. I do think that if that list does get out, this is the only, I guess, opposite end of that conspiracy. If that list were to get out, I think this world would be very different. When you see like Prince Charles was on there, or whichever prince it was. I think it's Charles was on that island multiple times.
Andrew.
Oh, thank you. Andrew was on that island multiple times. Oh, yeah. Charles is the king now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's dying, though. He's dying.
Yeah. I forget what kind of cancer it is, but that'd be a fast turnaround for a king. Could that be shortest reign ever?
No, I think there was one that got killed like a month or two into it.
Okay, there we go.
But they used to have battles back then.
Fair point. So if that list did get out, I mean, you would... we'd be looking at a lot of our leaders very differently, I think.
Yeah, but is there anyone going to be held accountable for anything?
That's the other half.
That's the whole problem.
There's a bunch of battles.
No one's accountable for anything anymore.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I mean, they're finally making an example of the 7 guys that attacked the 2 cops in Times Square 2 weeks ago.
Are they? I thought they...
Well, they let them out the first time, but now I guess the backlash was so severe, they actually rounded them
crazy.
up. They rounded them up. Like,
Good.
Now they're posting bail on them, okay? But they're still going to get out. They're going to get out.
Yeah, that one's wild to me. But, yeah, I mean, to your point, no one's held accountable. We still don't have a full list. We know Clinton's been on there a bajillion times, and no one does anything about that. And he doesn't have the best track record to begin with going to that.
Not at all.
So, what do you think comes of that? When that list does get... Like, what do you think is going to happen the day that list gets...
Well, first of all, I don't even trust that they will actually publish the whole list.
Yeah.
They'll redact the list. Okay?
They already started, right? Because there's people that... So, I think a lot of people don't know this, but a lot of the people that did go to that island were only there for like a day for actual meetings. It was used for that.
Yeah.
Excuse me. But...
Some people have said, you can't release my name. It's going to destroy me.
Yeah. Right. And you need like the evidence to show it. So there are some people that are already redacted.
Yeah.
But then it's like, well, how many do you want to redact? Now we can do what we want.
I mean, if there's people on there that should be held accountable for something and you've redacted the name, then what's the point?
Yeah.
Okay? And at this point, again, it's been years. So
yeah,
why does it take so long for justice to turn around in the country?
Yeah.
Years and years before somebody's tried in a case.
Yeah.
Okay?
So what do you think the goal was for... Let's say it was a CIA op the whole time. You do it because obviously there's a certain power that you want to have, deep-rooted in Hollywood, deep-rooted in the powers that be in other countries. What do you think the goal was for the CIA? I know that's a big question to ask. Like, I don't know if you can answer that, but what do you think's the...
Well, what was Epstein's occupation? Was he an arms dealer?
I think he was an information dealer.
I read that he's an arms dealer.
Okay.
So if he's an arms dealer, that ties him to the CIA. Because all these countries, all over the world, are getting arms from somebody. Whether it's Russian, American. And if he's facilitating...
Well, that's what the Bushes did, right? Remember the Bushes supplied both sides of World War I and World War II.
Right.
People forget about that stuff.
So...
So you think it's so you just think it was an arms deal kind of psyop sort of deal?
I think it was an arms deal, and he was, a willing participant. And at some point, maybe they wanted to eliminate the partnership, so they turned on him.
Oh, so you think they turned on him before the whole thing kind of came out? Like you think the whole thing coming out was part of the plan?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. See, I would have thought that opposite. It got out when he didn't want it to, and then they had to get rid of him in prison.
No, when they no longer needed him, or when they felt it was getting too hot, they said it's time for him to go.
Here's my argument to that.
Don't they have a history of that, though? Don't they? Does the CIA have a history of getting rid of...
Here's my on-the-fly kind of argument to that would be, I have to believe it's very hard to find another person to kind of take his place. And you need to keep those ties that... I'm just thinking as if I was the CIA. You want to keep those ties somehow. If he's your only tie connector with the list and whatever, I'd keep him alive as long as possible. So that means that either he turned, right? He probably went to, they say, the Mossad or whoever, Israeli contacts. I don't know how easy it is to find another person to fill that position.
Well, maybe the child trafficking got sloppy, and they figured they had to cut ties.
Are you talking about Pizzagate?
Pizzagate,
yeah,
and a whole host of other things. I mean, U.S. is supposed to be the #1 country for child trafficking.
Really?
So
I didn't know that was. I would have thought it was like France or something.
No.
I've seen Taken, the movie Taken. I feel like it's France, but maybe you're right. I'm sure you're right. You've probably done the research.
Again, it's what I read.
Yeah.
That's what I read.
Yeah, I don't know what comes.
No
of it,
idea
though.
if it's true or not.
Yeah, I don't know what comes of it though. In the sense of, let's say this list does come out. Does anyone get held accountable for
No, nobody,
just walk free?
Nobody's going to be held accountable, except you may view somebody as being morally corrupt, but nothing's going to happen to them. They're not going to go to jail. They're not going to be tried for any crime. Okay, all of the victims have by this point been paid or silenced in some way, so they're not going to come forward any longer.
Do you think the list will ever actually get released, or just part? Well, you said parts of it, but do you think
parts
that?
of it.
Yeah.
Just parts of
do you think they're going to release? Oh, well, yeah, that's a loaded question. I was going to say, do you think that they're going to release only the non-important people, like Stephen Hawking?
Exactly. They're gonna release the names that it's not a consequence if that person's name is out in the public.
Right. Like Stephen Hawking, I mean, how much damage is that guy doing?
Okay.
You know?
Well, he's not doing any damage any longer, right?
Yeah, fair point. I don't know
ground.
what he was really doing when he was alive, though. It's like, I don't know how fast that scooter gets, but I feel like you can kind of outrun him.
I mean, they say that Roberts was there several times, Supreme Court justice.
Yep.
Okay. I mean, is his name actually on the list? Are they gonna actually produce his name on the list?
Well, the other one that I hear is Trump's been on that island a couple times, but again, whether it's for meetings or whatnot. But then I hear people, they say flight logs say he's never been there.
Well, there's different lists too. There's
Yeah.
lists of people who are on the plane, and lists of people who are on the island.
Right.
So.
Right, the plane was kind of leased out, to my understanding.
Yeah, the plane, I can understand anybody can end up on the plane,
Yeah.
I mean, if you were in the airport that day and you were looking for a ride home, and they said, we got room on this.
Yeah, just hop on in. Yeah.
I'm in.
I don't know. That's another one. We have flight logs of being on the plane, but I guess a lot of the flight logs don't say, it went to the island or not. It just says point A to point B. There's still, but they've talked about like the refuel and stuff. You have to stop somewhere. So there's no way you went from A to B. There had to be some stop somewhere. So that's where they try and get people. And I think the ones that are taken off that list were the ones that were able to prove that they did go from point A to B without having to stop.
What's the island going to become, Chris? What do you think the island's going to become?
Oh, that's a great question.
Like a Club Med place now? Or
you know what they did with Michael Jackson's Neverland or whatever? Turned it into a little amusement park or something? No. I don't know what they're going to do with it. I think someone's going to buy it eventually. I think many years have to go by and someone will redo it, maybe knock it down, restart it. But I think it's too public now in the sense of now you have people that will just take a helicopter ride over to it just to see it. So I think it's too hard to hide anything there anymore. The theory that I've heard is they're probably going to move the whole trafficking or whatever operation that was to somewhere off of Israel or like Turkey, that kind of area. So those are the theories that I've heard, just where we have deep roots. So, yeah. I don't know, I wonder how much of it's like, when we talk about Illuminati and all that stuff, I don't know how much of that's another deep dive that I'd have to do. I just don't know if they really have a hand in that. I think that's all government. I'm sure their money's involved, but I don't know if they really have anything to do with it.
Yeah.
So, could the government go, hey, we're going to nudge you guys into this, the deep state, whatever, nudge you into taking over this operation? I really don't know. I don't know what happens to the island. I don't know what the motivation would be. Obviously, there's going to be a new generation of power. So what I mean by that is you have these new, younger actors that they're going to try and get into it at some point. So this kind of goes back to what we were just talking about as to why they got rid of him. And why would you get rid of him? Because now you have to start all over. Who's going to be that guy? And I think people kind of underestimate the deep roots that Epstein had. I mean, the CEO of Versace gave him a $30 million penthouse in New York City, right?
Right.
You don't just give someone a $30 million penthouse. So
he had hooks in with everybody.
I don't care who you are. That's too hard to do. You can't just grab a random person and say, hey, deep root yourself in society of all over the world. Right. It's impossible. So that's why when you look at that guy's background of how he got from where he was to this island and how he ran everything, there's not much information. It's just he was born here. All of a sudden he's the wealthiest guy in the world and he was doing all this stuff and then everything else comes out. You have to find someone who's that secretive with their life and able to manipulate others. I don't know how you do that. I don't know how you just find someone to do that.
Yeah, unless you groom somebody from the time they're 18 years old.
And nowadays, I don't know if you could do it with social media, with cameras, with how hard it is to pull off like a Grand Theft Auto nowadays. It's like impossible. Every Uber car has like a camera in it, and people still do it. So
meanwhile, carjackings are an all-time high.
Yeah, which is insane. Yeah,
all being photographed.
Yeah, you can't get away with anything anymore. So. Yeah, I don't know what happens with the Epstein Island stuff in the end. I don't think you can just start over from scratch. You'd have to wait a generation at least before you try doing that again.
And then maybe Disney could put up another park there or something. Huh?
Yeah. Well, Universal's putting a new park. I don't know if you saw that. We're going back. I'm waiting. 2025, baby! Okay. So, yeah. I mean, one of these days, I know you're a big Disney guy. We should start talking about the Disney conspiracies. We haven't done one of those.
Yeah.
The Disney conspiracy is... very interesting to me. Right? He was a borderline Nazi, Walt Disney. He had a lot of Nazi friends. So people forget about that. Also, the amount of kids that go missing every year. So, actually, this ties into the Epstein stuff. I don't know if you've heard this theory, but they did kind of like a backtrack as to how many kids went missing in Disney throughout the last, 50 years or something. A lot of those kids ended up on that island. Really? So was that a Disney shipping kids over, or was that someone going into Disney taking these kids?
I didn't see that at all.
Oh, I'll have to send you that.
Yeah,
there's a whole theory on that. So a little less conspiracy into politics. We kind of skimmed over the Ukraine stuff with Putin's interview with Tucker Carlson. What do you think of Ukraine? What do you think that's at? We got time for one more. Real fast, I just want to let everyone know. It's Super Bowl Sunday, and we got kickoff in about half an hour.
Yeah.
So, I know we're kind of speed running this one, guys.
I just think it's very telling that the documents that Joe Biden took were all based on either Ukraine or China.
Yep.
That's everything that he took.
Which is hilarious because, right, Trump's going through all this shit for the last 2 years, basically, and they go, yeah, Biden's a little too incompetent to go into court. And everyone's like, what?
So, Trump should just start tripping and falling and forgetting things, and they'll have to let him off too then, right?
Yeah, exactly. Fair is fair.
Ukraine. It's been a corrupt country all along.
Highest neo-Nazi population.
Okay. Biolabs under the hospitals. Biolabs under the schools. All right? So, at some point, I thought Putin was going to be doing us a favor and knocking these things out. I mean, the shame of this whole thing, whether it's Israel, Ukraine, Syria, it's the people that die in the conflict. Mm-hmm. But again, the governments are so corrupt in so many of these countries, and the people are just expendable. They're just part of the byproduct of the corruption. But we're losing, on this earth, millions of people. If you look at the last 50 years of wars, millions and millions of people being killed by governments. So,
well, I'm also thinking of, and the other side of that is our repopulation of the world is at the lowest low we've ever had in centuries.
Yes.
Right? So we're not repopulating fast enough. China's on its last licks, as I'm sure you know.
Right. But this is what Bill Gates wanted. Bill Gates said that the earth was only meant to support, I think he said 5 million people, or 500 million people, I think. That's what the earth was meant to support. So that's like crazy, right?
I don't think that, I think they've redone that research, though. I don't believe that's true. In the sense of, I think Bill's very wrong on that one, Mr. Gates.
I have a video. I have a video.
Scares me a little bit.
I have the video. I'll find the video.
Yeah.
I'll send you the video.
That guy scares me because he's a guy that's deep rooted into a lot of things, and it's stuff that I know he's a smart man in the sense of he built computers. I can't deny him of that, but I think once you start going out into other areas of right, they were trying to weaponize mosquitoes, right?
Yes,
that's insane. That was his goal. He's buying up all the mosquitoes.
He did the polio vaccine that they used in India and Pakistan.
They were talking about putting the COVID vaccine.
Crippled tens of thousands of kids, killed kids getting this vaccine.
Yeah.
And, they threw him out of the country. They said, you can't experiment here anymore. But once he paid off enough people, he's back there again with more vaccines. Mm-hmm. So I just don't understand how people allow themselves to take advice, political advice from a rock star or a movie star? Don't you have enough brains to form your own opinion?
If Taylor Swift tells me to vote blue, I'm voting blue.
This is just crazy. It's all crazy.
So with Ukraine, do you think it's a lost cause at this point?
Absolute lost cause.
Yeah, I
absolute lost cause. Okay?
We've
The money we're sending there isn't even going to fight the war.
Yeah.
They're buying houses in Switzerland. They're buying cars. Again, it's the government. The governments are corrupt. They're getting the money. They're, certain individuals will benefit from the money being sent over there, but the average person in the street, they're not seeing a penny of what's going over there.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Okay.
A lot of people are fleeing because they don't even agree with.
In the meantime, our country, our infrastructure is crumbling. Our electrical grid can't survive another 10 years. Mm-hmm. Don't have drinking water in 15 of the 50 states. Okay, out west, no more drinking water. They're going to be out of drinking water by 2030. There'll be no drinking water. Okay, take a look at the video of Lake Mead, Lake Powell. Okay, the water level is ridiculous. They can't even put boats in a lot of the areas of the lake anymore. It's too shallow.
Wow.
So
I didn't know that.
We should be building desalination plants. We should have been building them 10 years ago. Okay? You got the Pacific Ocean, you got the Atlantic Ocean. There's no reason why we can't have drinking water in this country.
Yeah, well, Putin brought up a good point about, which is wild to say. That's like isn't that a crazy thing to say about Putin in the sense of, brings up a good point about America. I never thought I'd say that 10 years ago, or 5 years ago, more realistically, but he's right. We have a border crisis, and for some reason, every time we do a border bill, they're also adding money to Ukraine and to the Israeli war. Right. How many wars can we fight at the same time? Right. We're not there.
It's time to fight the war in this country.
Yeah.
In this country, and it's not just the border. It's making our country more livable.
So when people say, "How could you give up on Ukraine?" What would you say to them?
We gave up on Americans. We gave up on America. Why am I worried about Ukraine? We gave up on America. Look at our airports. Look at our railroads. Have you been on New Jersey Transit? Have you been on that train?
No, not in a long time.
You can't
Not
get
since
to
high school.
You can't get to New York City from New Jersey without the train breaking down.
Really?
The rolling stock is 50, 60 years old. It's basically falling apart on the tracks. There isn't a week that goes by that a tree doesn't fall on the high power wires on the Gladstone Morristown line.
Really?
Why are trees still growing next to these high tension wires on the railroad? The railroad's been there for 100 years. They've had 100 years to get rid of these trees. But every week there's a tree that's going to fall. There's a storm coming on Tuesday.
What are the odds?
Okay.
Yeah.
There'll be a tree coming down somewhere. And the train shut down for the day. So,
yeah. Wow. Yeah, you're right. It's all those little things that
we got to start investing in this country. If this country had everything working the way it's supposed to, the way it could be, I have no problem helping the other guys. But we're not helping ourselves.
Yeah.
We're not helping ourselves.
Well, if you look at our most inner cities, the democratically run ones, they have the most problems. Right?
Inner cities.
We have war on drugs.
Inner cities are trash.
Yeah.
Just get on an Amtrak train and drive through an inner city, whether it's D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia. You can't even walk the streets of the cities anymore.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah, well, yeah, my friends that lived in New York City the last 7 years, now they're like, I have to get out. It's too dangerous.
I'm going to make a prediction right here on your podcast tonight.
Oh, okay.
There's a prediction. By the end of 2024, New York City will declare bankruptcy.
Really?
Okay?
Mark it.
By the end of 2024, you'll see Adams making a speech that the city is now bankrupt. Between the migrant problem, the lack of tourism, the crime, it's going down the tubes.
Yeah.
I worked in that city 40 years. I've never, ever, up until now, seen an empty store for lease on Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue.
Wow.
Go drive down those streets right now. You'll see dozens of stores on both streets empty with a for lease sign hanging on the window.
Little fun fact for you. I'll have to cut this out because this has to do with our business, but I'm hoping that helps a little bit.
You know, the tourists aren't there. The tourists aren't there.
Yeah, I know people that go to New York City. I remember when the German au pairs were coming. There's a bunch of them at my YMCA, and they were saying how they go to New York City and they're like, it's not like the movies.
No.
They're like, yeah, it's just. But I don't know if it was ever really like the movies. You know.
I mean, remember, they couldn't be putting migrants in the hotels unless the hotels were empty to begin with.
Oh, well, what about migrants in schools in New York City? Have you heard of
Schools.
this? Now, when Mom and I talked about it a couple podcasts ago, that's ridiculous.
The Bed Bath & Beyonds that closed up, they're turning them into migrant housing now.
Yeah.
I want to know who's moving into all these apartment buildings that are being built all around through South Orange, Brick Church, Morristown. Every medium-sized town you go to, New Jersey, they're building 4 and 5-story apartment buildings. Where are all these people coming from? They're going to move into these apartments. They're being built for the migrants.
Yeah.
They're being built for the migrants. They don't have the money to pay the rent, so the government's going to pay the rent, and we're going to pay it through our taxes.
Yeah. Here's a question for you. This is a little off topic, but it goes back to the construction. So I hear like these giant skyscrapers in New York. A lot of them are used as kind of money laundering. Like people overseas will buy these apartments and use them kind of as like a money laundering front. How does that work?
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if you knew because of the construction days, but
I build them. I build them.
Yeah,
I build them and I walk away. What they're doing after that, I don't know.
Yeah, you know, okay, that's fine. Well, I know we did a little shorter than last time, but we have the big game in about half an hour. We got the big game. Yeah.
I
don't know if I have any other questions for you.
And we got the big dinner.
Oh yeah, my mom couldn't get the chicken fingers catered in time, so she bought like 100 orders of Red Lobster chicken fingers and just threw out the rice and.
Your mom puts out a fabulous spread.
Yeah.
We're doing it over 20 years now, and. I remember there used to be 30 people here.
Yeah.
And she's basically hosting it for
30 people.
For me and my wife every year now at this point.
Yeah, and Julian, who I think is here now. So.
But we still have the food for 30 people.
Of course. Oh, I'm going to be eating leftovers all week.
Right.
Especially because Dad leaves for Vegas on Tuesday. So it's just going to be me eating chicken fingers for a week. But yeah. Other than that, again, thank you as always for doing this. I don't know when this one will come out because I'm in New Jersey.
Yep.
I told all my viewers that I was going to be here for the week. So this will probably come out either Monday, like next Monday, or the week after that. But again, any other things you want to talk about before we go? It's your call.
Just to recap.
Go ahead.
Kennedy, you got to look at the Federal Reserve issue. 9/11, somebody's got to explain what thermite was doing in the debris. Right? Epstein's Island, release the whole list, not the redacted
list. Not parts.
List.
Yeah.
We don't want to know the redacted. We want to know the whole list.
And tell me what happens to some of the higher ups that were running the whole thing, like Ghislaine Maxwell.
Right.
Who's just sitting there doing nothing right now. She's out and about. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but she's like, she has bodyguards with her, but she'll go to stores.
I haven't seen it.
It's weird. And then, you didn't give the 9/11 stuff, really. You said thermite, but...
Thermite. Thermite's the answer to this whole thing on 9/11.
Okay.
If there's thermite in the building, then it did not come down naturally.
Right. And then Ukraine-Putin interview?
Ukraine? Listen, even if he's lying about half the things on the interview, it still makes us look bad.
Yeah.
Just half of what he said was true.
When we finished it, Mom brought up a good point. She said, it kind of gives you an idea what other countries think of us.
Yes, that's why we're hated around the world, because every place we go, we destroy their culture, their government, to make it the way we want it.
I know we're a little scatterbrained, but or I should blame myself. It's on me. But do you think if Trump was president still, this war would happen, the Ukraine war?
No.
Yeah, I used to say that and kind of said that kind of just because I was told. Right. When I look at the facts, especially when Putin talked about it, yeah, it makes sense because all Putin did was just sit on China's coattails and just wait for the right moment, right? There's a lot to go into.
There's one reason it wouldn't have happened, Chris. The energy. Russia would not have been selling the oil they were selling.
Yeah,
at the money they were getting.
Yeah,
because we would have been stopping that.
So who did
they would have been buying our oil. So you wouldn't have had the money to finance the war to begin with.
Right. So do you think that the CIA blew up the Nord Stream pipeline?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, I'm at the point where I do believe that we did that.
Yeah.
It makes sense because, again, even if Putin's lying, it goes to show that if that pipeline wasn't blown up, they would have had... They could have funded the war themselves. We wouldn't even have had... It would have been over by now. But... Yeah, to your point, it's all energy based. Whoever controls the oil controls the wars.
Right.
And thank God Saudi Arabia is not really doing any fighting.
Yeah.
But Russia can't give gasoline to anyone. So
I'm interested to see if Trump gets back in, if any of this reverses now.
oh man, that's tough. I think
If they run out of money fighting Ukraine, does that stop him from...
Yeah, I don't know if Trump has the ability at this point to. I know a lot of people, especially on the left, will talk about how he's just going to put his foot down and do all these things, and he really didn't do that in his first presidency. There's a lot of checks and balances. Unfortunately, I think he has to finish up what's going on in Ukraine one way or another than just saying, "Okay, we're done." Right?
Yep.
If anything, I think Trump can. If Biden's in office for another 4 years, I think China takes Taiwan. I think instantaneously, day one, once Trump gets not reelected, they're going in on that.
Yeah, they're probably just waiting till November to see what happens.
If Trump gets elected, I don't think they go for it. I think even Russia will hold back a little bit because then I think if Trump can reestablish the relations between Russia and the U.S., which we need whether you like him or not, I think we won't have a World War III. If Biden is in for another 4, which man, at this point I don't know if it's even possible.
He can't live another 4 years.
I don't. If he stays in, I think we'd start a draft. I think that's when World War III happens. But
he's in a deteriorated state. He can't possibly last 4 more years.
I mean, they just announced it yesterday.
You might vote for him. He might get elected, but he's never going to serve a second term.
Yeah, he can't do a full term. But then I say if Kamala's going to be his vice president, which would be also very surprising because when was the last time you saw anything on her? I haven't seen her in almost a year.
Well, she did a great job at the border.
Great job. As Cortez is telling everyone not to look. So, that lady. But, this is definitely going to be a turning point in history. Elections are one thing because it affects the U.S., but that's going to be an election that really affects the world. And again, I might be saying that from my perspective of being only 28 and only going through so many presidencies. This one to me is like, hey, if Trump isn't elected, there's a very high probability we're going to have a World War III. So, and they've said it, our generals have said it, we can't fight multiple wars because we've really debilitated our military with the COVID vaccine and all that, forcing vaccine mandates. So, it's going to be an ugly world war, no matter what. So, yeah, it's scary, but all right. Either way, we just did an hour and 2. Thank you as always. We'll have to do another one.
Thank you.
I'll start picking 4 good ones for us.
Okay.
And then those are the ones we'll go over, and then we can talk about everything else. When we have more time, we'll do a longer podcast, but we don't want to miss kickoff.
All right.
So thank you. The only things I have to promote are social media, promo codes, stream links, other stuff down below. And thank you as always, Mr. Grutta.
Thank you.
Let's go party.